So, I think what is we were just talking with Doug about is you talk about where we came from, where we've come from as a nation early on, the Christian worldview, just being in the atmosphere, and the Puritan hope for the future, the kingdom of Christ. Jesus reigns; He's Lord over all. He's going to be victorious over the nations, and there's such a view, a long-term view of the future that you can find in early Christians, particularly Puritans. And I think what encourages me a lot about Doug and about what you guys are doing, St. Andrews, and just everything, even coming to Moscow, is there's so much of an investment in this world, and so much of an investment in children, and growing and thinking far, far ahead.
Right.
And so I'd love to hear you talk about that, just in the sense that the connection between our view of Christ and His kingdom, His victory, and then investing in young people and training their minds and having them become experts in all these different areas, and taking dominion over the arts and the sciences and literature and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of different pieces there. I mean, one is that you tagged already, is just this idea of having this view of both the importance of this promise that we're given for our own kids and what we're passing on to them, and the duty that falls on us to give them the full paideia of God, to raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, so they truly see the depth and breadth and just the huge nature of the implications of the gospel. So that in and of itself is significant. So you've got this covenant promise, but then you also have this promise that the gospel is something that's meant to grow to fill the whole world.
Yeah.
And so it's something that touches this world, even though it comes down from Christ. Christ is incarnate, and so it fills this whole world. And that means not just that every soul is going to confess this, but all aspects of life are going to be brought into the service of the triune God. And so that's obviously a huge intellectual project to think about just all of those implications. But one of the things that's great about it is you find that as you survey sort of the depth of the implications of the gospel, it gives you more and more and more material with which to evangelize your children. Because we're not just talking about this one little gospel tract. We're getting to talk to them about just beauty of life itself and the beauty of the God we worship. And so you find gospel tracts everywhere, and it makes actually the evangelization of your own children that much more powerful and interesting, and the impact goes much further. But I think the other thing that we see is that along with the postmillennial hope, is we start to see this, that there's actually an antithesis. That there's a kingdom of light that's spreading, and that means there's a kingdom of dark that we're arguing against.
Yeah.
And I think Christians have radically underestimated, because they truncate the gospel and they have a small gospel. They also have radically underestimated all the implications of unbelief and the things that are around them that they swallow daily, and they don't realize that they're actually being indoctrinated into a way of thinking that's hostile to the gospel. And so a big part of the spread of the gospel is teaching our children, kind of pulling them back and making sure that they're getting a full view of the gospel, and then full view of how the gospel has implications for how they think about vocation, how they think about entertainment, how they think about all the things that are around them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So it's interesting because these Christian schools, they exist, they're around, Christian colleges and seminaries.
Right.
But there is something different, very different, when you're approaching all those areas of academics, again, art, literature, media, anything. When you approach it from a postmillennial perspective, there's something different in terms of the why and like the how and the end. What are we aiming for? So I'd love to have you talk about that, because I want people to hear how much that having a postmillennial view of the future really has implications that bring real transformation in so many areas.
Yeah. So I think one of the main insights and gifts that I've seen come out of the classical Christian movement is a sort of reorientation to the way you think about the purpose of education. And I think it aims towards the end that you're describing right there.
Yeah.
And right now we tend to think, the American public tends to think of education in terms of certain qualifications and small tools that will give you the ability to have certain jobs so that you can make some money, right? Yeah. And they tend to think in terms of, you've learned this skill, check, you've learned this skill, check. And so now when you combine these 7 skills, you can have this job, and then you can make this kind of money. And that tends to be how people think about education. But we don't see how much that is it's kind of a slave mentality. Because what it is it's a mentality where you're trusted to follow a checklist, and you're not given freedom to actually see what else is out there and how deep you can go. The thing with the classical Christian arts, classical Christian education in the liberal arts is it's the education of the free man. It's the education where you're, if I could illustrate it, this is the way I think you can make sense of it. Remember when MapQuest first came out, you could type in an address or a place you wanted to go.
Yeah.
And then you'd get this list of directions, right?
Yeah.
And so you got this list of directions, and it was take this left turn, go this many miles, which was great until you missed one, made one mistake, one wrong turn, and then the whole list was useless.
Yep.
And if you forgot to plug in the reverse, then you couldn't get home with that list either, because it doesn't work just going backwards.
Right.
But you give a list of steps to somebody that you don't trust. You give a list of steps to somebody who, if I was enlisted in the Marine Corps, and when I was very low on the totem pole, those were the kinds of instructions I got. Do this, check, do this, check, do this, check. And it was because nobody trusted me, and they shouldn't have, because I wasn't worthy of it. But what happens is, when you become a free man, when you're trusted to think for yourself and to plot your own course, it's more like, instead of being given that map with a list of instructions, you're given an actual map where you can step back and see the big picture and understand where this is going.
Yeah.
And that's what the free man is given. That's what the enlisted man gets, the little checklist. The officer gets the map. Free men should get an education, and Christians, we are in the gospel, we are free men. We should be given an education that teaches us to be free, to have the critical thinking skills to question that, to question this, and to build something new. That's the education, I think, that gives that a post-mill eschatology, it gives scope to that. It's this idea that I have somewhere that I'm going, and I want to think critically about it, understand the implications of the gospel for how to get there. That
Yes.
Piece it together, sort of. Okay.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay.
So what's the end goal in terms of New St. Andrews?
Right. So we're here to raise up leaders and shapers of culture. We want to get students who are taught to think critically and independently, but to do it in such a way that all things are brought under the lordship of Christ. And as they do that, as you go out and you live that kind of life, you start to build culture. You start businesses. You start, if I look on Main Street Moscow, that's the thing that is really fun right now, is I can point out restaurants. We got people that are making movies, a couple people different making movies, printing presses. There's a whole bunch of these different industries, a couple of tech startups that are all just right here on the street with this education, where they're taught to go and figure out how to serve God and glorify Him with the gifts that they've been given. So I want to equip as many young people like that go out and shape culture and do it in a way that is powerful, that brings out your love and your imagination and your hope, something that is compelling. That's a great restaurant is compelling. You walk in and you're overwhelmed with the goodness of God. Mm-hmm. A printing press, a movie studio. There are all these different places where we're seeing the goodness of God embodied and incarnated through Christians living faithfully. And then what we see is we start to see this next generation behind us that is excited about stepping in and filling the ranks and growing the numbers and spreading the implications of the gospel. So I want to, here again to say our job is to give that piece of, that little piece where we teach the kind of the habit of the mind to react in that way. I mean, I've used the illustration before, like, you throw a ball at some people, and some people kind of, their first thing is sort of flinch away, and some people reach forward and grab. And so what we want to do is we want to create that habit of the mind where when a student leaves NSA, they've learned the goodness of the gospel, they've learned to think independently, and they've learned how to shape culture through living out what they've lived here. And I want to see that grow over 500 to 1,000 years as we see the gospel get deeper here and spread wider beyond Moscow.
That's awesome.
Right.